ready for the jury?
Yes.
All right. Okay. You can have a seat, sir. All right, your next question.
Mr. Depp, I'd like to just briefly go through the security personnel that you just listed out before we took a break. How long has Leonard Damien been with you?
My kids are now 20, 23. Leonard Damien's been with me, I believe, roughly the same time as Mr. Bett, somewhere in the neighborhood of 16, 17 years. I can't be precise, but they were very young. My children were very young when they joined the team, which was really after Pirates was released in 2003, the first.
Now, you mentioned your children. What is Mr. Damien's role with respect to your children's security?
Excuse me?
You mentioned your children
Yes.
with respect to Leonard Damien. Is his role in connection with your children's security?
Yes, very much so. Leonard Damien and Sean Bett for quite a while were both sort of assigned, as it were, to my kids, taking them to school, picking them up from school if Vanessa and I were unable to do it, or even if we were there, we would drive with them to take the kids to school. And over the years, obviously, your children, my children have taken quite a shine to them, and they've become like another set of parents in a way.
And how long has Travis McGivern been with you?
Travis, I believe, a little bit less than that. I believe. I couldn't really speculate. If it's a little less, maybe it's 13 years, or I don't know.
Now, you mentioned that you had to bring on additional security after Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes.
How has the fame associated with that franchise affected your personal relationships?
Again, I would never complain about the repercussions, let's say, or the repercussions of the success of that film. But of course, as I said, there are sacrifices that one has to make. Sacrifices that you're not nearly ready for. just simply when you when you go to a town or you go on a press tour or something and you're staying in a hotel, people stay in hotels all the time. I stay in the hotel. We've found that it's just a lot easier if I stay put in a hotel and not kind of, again, especially if it's with the kids or something, I don't want them to, I've never wanted them to see me as a novelty. I just wanted to be dad, you know. Now, they're well aware of a lot, and they're well aware of pretty much everything. But no, you know, when you get recognized wherever you go, the basic truth is it's pretty simple. People are generally kind and curious, and if they've grown up with you in their living room, from a television series or from various films that they've seen, there's nothing menacing about being recognized. Sometimes there can be. Sometimes people can get weird, but we've found that it's just it's better all around if I stay in my hotel room and don't go out to too many restaurants or anything, because it generally causes a bit of a hubbub. If you go to a restaurant, someone calls the paparazzi, and you go in for a meal and you come out and there's 30 guys out there. It can be a little overwhelming. It's not something, I think I said it before, it's not something that it's not something that I've ever gotten used to, and it's something that I hope I never get used to. Because I don't think of myself in those terms. I used to be Johnny, if that makes sense. I used to be Johnny, and then my name, full name, which I honestly find still, it's difficult, it's uncomfortable to say my own name, because when I say it, I hear the commodity, I hear the product. So I went from Johnny to Johnny Depp, and then that name, with that name, Johnny Depp, and some image was cultivated. Certainly not by me, but the media, especially in those days, they must label you. They have to give you a label. And labels are one of the things that I've fought vigorously with regard to my work. I never wanted to be the poster boy. I never wanted to be the I don't have, you know, I'm not built with that kind of hubris. I don't have that kind of confidence. I can do virtually anything playing a character. I can become the character in my work, and that character may be able to spit out 100 words a minute, but me, myself, Johnny, I cannot. So therein lies the difference, you know.
Mr. Depp, other than acting, what other artistic pursuits do you have that may be a little less known to the general public?
Well, I've remained a musician. I've been a musician. I started playing the guitar when I was 12 years old, and that saved my life because I locked myself into in my bedroom at the age of 12, listening to records, moving the needle back, and then learning that piece, and then learning it again. So so much so that I don't remember. I have no memory of going through puberty. I was just playing the guitar. I was obsessed with my guitar.
Any other artistic pursuits?
I've always drawn since I was very small, since I was very little, and always enjoyed drawing, and then began to paint, and so there started learning about painting and trying to I suppose different ways of expressing oneself, different ways to release the things that are living in your head, whether they be beautiful memories, whether they be horrific memories, whether they be I have I need to create. It's a need. It's a. Of course, I want to create as well, but I actually need to create because I need to summon whatever it is that I need to summon, to whether that's within a film or a painting or a guitar note. All of those things should come from a place an organic place, a place of truth. Because if they don't, well, then you're just lying, aren't you? Every bit of truth, a person doesn't have to say anything on film. What's important is what's behind the eyes. And if they do say something, what's important is not necessarily the words that they say. It's very easy to say, I love you, but what brings it into the realm of truth is what's underneath it, what's not being said, the subtext, if you will. So, any artistic or creative venture, any film, anything that I do, that's where I'm coming from. That's my approach.
Mr. Depp, you mentioned words, and I think the jury has already seen some words that you've written in text messages.
Yes.
Can you please tell the jury a little bit about how you write?
Certainly. When I was young, when I was about 12 years old, my elder brother, Danny, walked into my room and ripped the Peter Frampton record off my record player, threw it across the room, and said, "You got to stop listening to this stuff." And he put this record on, and it started, and I'd never heard anything like it. It was called Astral Weeks by Van Morrison. So I'm a kid, 12 years old. So my brother had turned me on to Van Morrison, then he turned me on to soundtracks like Clockwork Orange or Last Tango in Paris. He turned me on to books by Jack Kerouac. He turned me on to books by Ginsberg, Philip K. Dick. Salinger. The whole James Joyce, the whole Hemingway, the whole thing. So I became very interested in vocabulary and the unique voices of these writers. And then I started reading people like Tom Robbins and Hunter S. Thompson, and then ended up becoming very close friends with Hunter Thompson for the last 10, 12 years of his life. And Hunter's writing, of course, because of the amount I spent, of time I spent with him, it has influenced my writing greatly. Hunter was known for inventing a thing called gonzo journalism, which is, it's the author putting himself in the situation as opposed to writing it from the author's point of view. He writes it with him in it. And there are great embellishments, and embellishments are great sort of ways that he would twist things and express his feelings, and so he became a huge hero, of course, to me, and a great friend. In my texts and in my emails, or sometimes just even in my writing, you take the subject and you try to express it in your own vernacular, and in that, for example, with the text messages that I apologize that everyone's had to experience. I am ashamed of some of the references made. I'm embarrassed that at the time, the heat of the moment, the heat of the pain that I was feeling, went to dark places. There is no, if you're writing, there is no set place that you have to stay in. You can travel, and sometimes pain has to be dealt with humor, and sometimes dark, very dark humor. I grew up watching Monty Python, so yes, it can tend to get into dark humor. It can tend to get words are used that for emphasis, words are used to express what you're feeling at the time. And it's just like growing up. You learn from those mistakes, you learn from those things, and you move forward, you know? And that's how you start to understand your own vernacular and what's important, you know, what's necessary and what's not necessary. I tend to be quite expressive in my writing, and after after the unfortunate words of Ms. Heard made their way into my heart and my head. Those are two very opposing things. So you're trying to find the best way to express something to a friend. Sometimes you're exaggerating, you know, something that you've done, just to make it sound, just to make him understand that, you know, I'm on planet question mark here. I don't know what's going on, but I know I'm in this situation, and I know that it cannot continue.
Mr. Depp, the jury's heard quite a bit from Ms. Heard's side about your drug and alcohol use, but I'm sure they'd like to hear from you. So could you please just tell them about your history of substance use?
Certainly. Again, this goes back to when I was a young boy. Excuse me. At about the age of, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, I can remember vividly my mom telling me to go get her nerve pills, you know, out of her purse that was hanging on the back of the door. So I'd go get the nerve pills, and I'd bring her the nerve pill. She'd take it, and you know, after a few years, you start to notice, well, you start to think about nerve pills. And then she seemed to calm down after she took those nerve pills. So when I was 11 years old, I wanted to calm down, and I didn't know how to. So I'd bring my mom her nerve pill, I would walk away, and I would take one myself to escape caring so much, feeling so much, to escape the chaotic nature of what we were living through. So that was the beginning when I realized that nerve pills calm the nerves. Pretty young age to do that. I can't say that I'm proud of admitting to that, but I have to say that I knew not what else to do. I knew nothing else that I could do. So as we were all growing up, there was always those kids who would say, let's party. Let's go party. I want to party. I've never used the word party in my life. I've never taken any substance for a party. I have taken these substances over the years, on and off, to numb myself of the ghosts, the wraiths that were still with me, and from my youth. So I needed, they were everything. It was just self-medication. One of those get me out of here moments, and you know, where you want to escape from is your own brain, your own head.
How often have you used substances throughout your life?
Having started with my mother's nerve pills at 11, of course, you know, that's around the age that you're introduced to marijuana. You're introduced to, and also depending on where you're living and who you're associating with, and who's around the neighborhood. I wasn't shy to try a substance to see if the effect of it would maybe even take a bit more of the edge off. So I started at 11, and I mean, I even mentioned this in an interview in TV Guide, if anyone remembers TV Guide, in 1989, where I was asked by the journalist why I believed that kids who were watching the show, 21 Jump Street, about police officers in school as undercover cops, but as students, I was asked why these kids or whoever should believe me or trust me or listen to me, and I said, look, I could, because I've experienced it, and I can tell them that there is no future in it, that there's nothing but a kind of a postponing of the inevitable. That one day you're going to have to face those feelings. One day you will meet those, let's call them demons from your youth. So I was straight up, open and honest at that time in a very, I mean, TV Guide was it was right at the register when you checked out at the grocery store. It was like the most popular thing, and it was a very straight little magazine. But I told them I'd pretty much done all the drugs that I was aware of by the time I was 15 years old, and which was true. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I continued into that, you know, forest of possibilities with regard to substances. I wasn't dropping acid every 5 minutes. I wasn't There were many years that I didn't touch a substance and no drugs. There were many years that I didn't have a drink. So as I said, it's never been for the sort of party effect. It's been for trying to numb the things inside that have that can plague someone's who's experienced trauma. But the characterization of the characterization of my substance, quote unquote, substance abuse that's been delivered by Ms. Heard is grossly embellished, and I'm sorry to say, but a lot of it is just plainly false. I think that it was easy. It was an easy. I think it was an easy target for her to hit, because once you've trusted somebody for a certain amount of years and you've told them all the secrets of your life, that information then, of course, can be used against you, especially if it's taken to a point that is teetering on impossible, and teeters over impossible, in fact, at times. It's so, I am not some maniac who needs to be high or loaded all the time. In fact, in Australia, from before Australia and in Australia, I had been off of alcohol for, I believe it was about 18 months.
Mr. Depp, you've mentioned some periods of sobriety throughout your life. How many would you estimate you've had?
Quite a number. You know, on various films, you see. I suppose, I guess maybe by example, if anyone's, well, if you're familiar with Hunter Thompson's book, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which I was lucky enough to make into a film with Terry Gilliam. The film calls for myself and my attorney to be absolutely blotto out of our heads constantly throughout the film. And most people just assume that, well, they just got wasted and they filmed them. There would have been no way you couldn't act that. You couldn't make that film with two actors who were loaded. There would be no way. And then to the other extreme, Donnie Brasco, a film that I made about an FBI agent. I had to go into a training regime where I had to eat 5 meals a day, drink 5 shakes a day, you know, these protein shakes per day, work out 3 to 4 hours a day because I had to gain 20 to 30 pounds of muscle. There was certainly no abuse of substances then. There's been no abuse of substances on film sets. There have been there's been no moments where I would have been considered out of control. Never. In fact, it's not been mentioned. I'm sure they don't want to mention it, but I remember that because when I was with Ms. Heard and her friends, and we were all drinking wine, and I smoking marijuana, they used to tease me because of what they said was a ludicrous tolerance, because I never appeared loaded or high or any of that. Even if I felt a little spinny, no one would have ever known.
Mr. Depp, is there any substance that you've ever been addicted to?
Yes.
And what is that?
Roxycodone, or Roxycontin, which is it's an opiate. It's I think oxycodone has the opiate and then some pain, like paracetamol or something, and then the Roxys are just the opiate, as far as I remember. And when I was working on Pirates 4, and there was a scene in which I had to grab this large gold and red, stately gilt chair, pick it up and throw it, chuck it out this big giant window. And so I did it, and as I swung around to throw the chair out the window, I felt this immediate electricity from the bottom of my spine down my left leg, and it was like an electricity that burned. So I had obviously it was sciatica, so I had obviously pinched something, done something. So I saw a chiropractor or a kine or whatever. I saw chiropractors, and to no avail. Then I saw a doctor, and the only pain medication that she recommended and prescribed to me was Roxycodone. And there was a part of me that was a little bit worried, just in a sense that I know I've witnessed friends and people over the years who've had problems with heroin, and I didn't want to get bit by that snake, and I started taking the Roxys, and I was bit by the snake, and then before you know it, that monkey is on your back to stay. And it's not like you take those pills to get high. You take them to, once the addiction has grabbed hold of you, you're not taking those pills to get high. You're taking those pills to get well, or to get better. Because if you're without the pill, your body will start to go into various you'll withdrawals, and so I was on the Roxy's for a number of years, 4 or 5 years, I think, maybe more. I don't know, but the key was that if you take 2, you will be what they call on the knot. You will be that. You will just drop into sleep. So yes, I didn't like being dependent on these pills. I didn't like being dependent on a drug that you'd take only so you wouldn't get withdrawals. That's what it becomes. It's like a junkie. The reason why so many, well, now there's a huge fentanyl problem, but the reason why junkies generally, why they end up overdosing, is because they're looking for the first high again. And you don't get that. You don't get your first high again. So what do? You up the stakes and you put more, you take more. And that's what makes that's what makes things go dark for them. Because they overestimated the amount that their body could tolerate, and they go blue and they die. So, yeah, didn't want that.
Mr. Depp, do you have an estimate as to what year you started taking the opiates that you just described?
When 2000, or excuse me, it was Pirates. Bless you. 4, I believe. Pirates 4. No, it was Pirates 4. Rob Marshall directed it. I don't know what year that was. Maybe. I actually don't. I have no idea what year that was.
Was it before you were in a relationship with Miss Heard?
Yes. I believe so.
And you didn't detox, and you detoxed from those opiates during your relationship with Miss Heard. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, so of course, yes. So they must have, yeah, they did come around prior to my meeting Miss Heard.
After you detoxed from the opiates, have you ever taken any opiates ever again?
No, I can't. That's no. Once you've been bit, you'll be bit again. So no, even with my finger, I think that it was like Motrin 800, but no opiates. No, I have not taken an opiate since, and I won't unless I plan on going through the hell of the pure horror of detoxing, of coming off those drugs. No.
Mr. Depp, I'd like to now turn to your relationship with Miss Heard. Can you please tell the jury how you met Miss Heard?
2000, in around 2008, Hunter Thompson and I were going through some of his manuscripts of his books that have been published, and then I found this manuscript in one of his boxes, and it was called The Rum Diary, and I had heard about it, and I knew it was what they called his long-lost novel, in fact, the only novel he ever wrote. And I showed it to him, and Hunter was shocked. Oh my God, that's where it is, you know. And so he said, read me some. So I started reading this to him, and he said, this is a movie, you know. We must produce this together. And, you know, he got all excited about the idea of doing that. So we went right into it, and we started to set up meetings to get money, financing to develop the project. And we finally ended up getting the money to develop the project and to make the film. Hunter, from his own dilemmas in his life, committed suicide, but having had long talks with him, I knew every angle of the book, but I knew every angle of the film that he wanted, which was going to be a bit different than the book. And Bruce Robinson, who was a great writer-director, directed a film called With Nail and I and How to Get Ahead in Advertising, was the one director that Hunter and I talked about. And so I went to Bruce, who was a friend of mine, and I ripped him out of retirement because he never wanted to direct another film again. I pulled him out of retirement after 27 years, and he agreed to write the screenplay and direct the film. And we proceeded. During the auditioning process, Bruce was, before that, Hunter had very specific ideas of what these characters should be. Bruce had been auditioning girls or women for the role of Chenault in the film, and there were this sort of the starlets that were up and coming, or there were some that were well known and things of that nature. But you know, one of the things that Hunter was very against was stunt casting. That is to say, put a bunch of very famous people in a movie and we'll let them go, and then hope for the money in the end. So Bruce had asked me. He said he had been auditioning this one particular actress named Amber Heard. He said that he'd auditioned her 5 times, and he was he wasn't sure about her capabilities as an actress with regard to the film and the character and taking direction and that sort of thing. So he asked me if I would read with her for the film, and I had already met a number of actresses and things. And so what I said to Mr. Robinson is, I said, Bruce, I don't. If you've auditioned her 5 times, you've seen the best and the worst, I suppose. So me putting her, this girl, in an uncomfortable situation, you know, saying, hey, all right, let's read this, I think it's a far better idea that we just meet so that I can see how she behaves, see how she reacts, because that's really all it is, reaction, behavior, and you don't have to push anything else, you know. So they made an appointment. She came to my office. I took one look at her and I thought, yeah, that's the Chenault that Hunter wants. That's the one. I thought, yeah, she could definitely kill me. That's what Hunter wants. And so we spoke, and she was sweet as pie, pleasant, again, you know, intelligent, literate, very good taste. And I felt like what I felt and what I told Bruce was, look, when you put someone in a situation that they're obviously going to feel under pressure, it's not the best way to really know what they're capable of. And I made suggestions such as, and which I ended up making to Ms. Heard. I made suggestions of films that might give her some insight into what we were looking for in terms of the film. Which is to say, I gave her films like To Have and Have Not, and things of that nature, because I wanted to. There was something very important that I felt she needed to know about stillness, as opposed to, you know, going broad or acting a little too much. So I felt like I could be a bit of a traffic cop in that sense, so that, because if we could connect, then it could work, as long as there was truth in her eyes, and as long as there was truth coming out of her dialogue, you know, then it's all in the editing. So I felt that I could help her with that idea of stillness, and so that's when I first met Miss Heard.
How would you describe your interactions with Ms. Heard when you worked together on The Rum Diary?
Initially, well, yeah, no, mostly very few interactions. I remember there was a time, I wasn't working that day, but I was producing, you know, one of the producers of the film, and it was a scene from the book it was a scene where Ms. Heard's character was in a nightclub and were amongst the locals, and she's very drunk and everybody's very drunk, and she ends up dancing with a few of the local, like one of the local guys and stuff, and then the other local guys start to sort of close in on her. In the book and in the screenplay, as it was written, there was a requirement for nudity for the part, and I was on set the day that they were shooting that, and as I was watching the crowd coming in on her, I realized, you know what? Because I would check on Ms. Heard and say, "Are you all right? Are you sure you're okay? Because this is, you know," she was like, "No, I'm fine." But I realized that with the crowd surging in towards her, that we wouldn't have to do the nudity. Because if she took her shirt off and she had a red bra on and a skirt, then if she had a red bra in her hand, when the crowd surged in on her, all she had to do was lift the red bra up out of the crowd, and there's no nudity, but it's certainly implied, because then the character disappears for a few days, and she's quite a wreck when she comes back because bad things have happened to her. So I remember telling Ms. Hurd, hey, you don't have to take your clothes off. You don't have to take your top off. You don't have to, everything's cool. And she was appreciative. But other than that, we didn't really have much interaction until there was a scene where I'm taking a shower, and then she comes into the room and she opens the shower, and we kiss. And that moment was it felt like something. It felt like something that I shouldn't be feeling, because she had her wife, and even though it was a scene, and she had her wife, and I had Vanessa and kiddies, and yeah.
When would you say your romantic relationship with Miss Hurd actually began, if not in that moment?
Well, I think there was something in the kiss in the shower that was very real. So that day after work, Miss Hurd had come to my trailer, and I was just sitting there listening to actually old blues stuff, and we had a glass of wine, and we kissed. And at that point, my trailer was the only trailer in the parking lot. She had a mind to stay in the trailer there for a while with me, and I didn't think that was a very good idea on any level, especially since there were about 9 Teamsters waiting to move the trailer. And then that was that until whenever we did the first day of the press junket for the Rum Diary in Los Angeles 2 years later, and she had broken up, I believe, with her wife, and my for lack of my wife, we weren't married, but she was, of course, my wife, Vanessa. We had some not so great situations, you know. She was stuck in America. She wanted to go back to France. She wanted to have her life back. She's a well-known singer there. And that's not long out there. Right around then is when Miss Heard and I started to see each other here and there occasionally.
Between the end of the filming of The Rum Diary and the press junket, did you and Miss Heard communicate at any time in between?
I don't remember. I remember that there was a white dress that she really was infatuated with. That she really loved this dress that she wore in the film, and so I went to Colleen Atwood, the costume designer, and to Bruce, and I said, "Do you think we can snag this white dress and send it to Amber, you know, after she'd wrapped, because she loved the thing." I remember talking to her, I think, then, but briefly.
What did you like about Miss Heard when you first started your romantic relationship?
She seemed to be the she seemed to be the perfect partner, in a sense, in my head, for me, because she, as I said, she seemed to be very knowledgeable about old obscure blues music that I listened to and really liked. She was literate. She was sweet, funny, nice, all those things, you know. And she was, and from the beginning of our relationship at that time, for a good year and a half, she was wonderful. And then things just started to change, or things started to reveal themselves. That's, I think, is a better way to put it.
You mentioned earlier in your testimony that Miss Heard would take off your boots when you would get home from work. What other types of behaviors did you observe in Miss Heard early in the relationship?
Little things that you would it would just, you'd question in the back of your mind, you know, if she wanted to go to bed, I'd say, "Oh, well, I can't sleep, you know, right now." And rather than go and just lay in a bed and stare at the ceiling, I would say, I'll just watch, I'll be out here watching TV or hanging out. And that was just not acceptable. Just not acceptable. It would stir up some rather unusual reactions from her. I didn't understand why as a 50-something-year-old man, was not allowed to go to sleep when I wanted to, as opposed to when she wanted to. It started out with little things like that. And again, they just, they just, I suppose like anything, if they're allowed to continue, then they are allowed to grow. They're allowed to blossom into whatever they're going to become.
What were you and Miss Heard's nicknames for each other?
I called her Slim.
Why is that?
I called her Slim because of the film that I had given her to watch, like in terms of stillness, was Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart. And I called her Slim, and she called me Steve, which was Lauren Bacall's and Humphrey Bogart's nicknames for each other in the film. That was their names in the film. And it wasn't lost on me the fact that there was an age difference, and that my God, when Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, that's when they met on that film. He was 45 years old and she was 19, and they stayed together for many years until Bogart passed away. So, yeah, there was a kind of a joke, not joke, but just, yeah, I acknowledge the fact that I was the old craggy bogey and she was this beautiful creature, just this stunning creature.
When did you first meet Miss Heard's parents?
I first met Miss Heard's parents when they had come out to Los Angeles, I believe, and yeah, and I feel like that I met them. I think they came to my place, to my studio, and they were two completely opposite end of the spectrum people. Paige was she was an angel. She was an angel, and I loved her very much. I loved her instantly, and we had a very good relationship. Her father, David, was the opposite end of that. He was this outrageous kind of, almost like a cartoon cowboy, you know. And he was, the initial thought, my initial kind of definition for David would have been rascally, like a rascal, you know. But I loved, I grew to love them both very much, as well as her sister Whitney. And yes, it felt like I had been welcomed into some sort of family. I had been accepted into this family, and those relationships stayed solid until just a bit after we'd separated.
How often did you spend time with Miss Heard's parents during your relationship with Miss Heard?
Quite a lot. Whether I used to have a boat, and we would take her parents, her family, and we'd go sail the boat, and drop anchor at the island, and we would spend a week, 2 weeks, whatever, on the boat on the island. Also, they would come to Los Angeles quite a bit. We also would go to Austin here and there to see them, visit them. Every year we would, on their anniversary, I had a friend of mine who had a restaurant in Austin, like a very good restaurant in Austin, and I'd call him up and basically set it up so that every year on their anniversary they could just go there, and they'd be taken care of, and there would be no bill, so they could just celebrate. And I think one of the things we did was, yes, we would try to order them car so that they could drink. No, I was very fond of them, very fond of them.
Now, you mentioned Miss Heard's sister, Whitney. When did you first meet Whitney?
I don't remember exactly when I met Whitney the first time, but I felt when I first met Whitney, there was something in what I saw of Whitney that was much less confident than Amber, much more revealing of insecurities.
Objection, Your Honor, just foundation. What he
All right.
saw in Whitney.
I think if you could answer the question.
Okay.
You want to ask the question again? Or this one?
We can move on.
Okay, that's fine.
How would you describe your relationship with Whitney?
Great. I mean, fantastic. I called her sis. I loved her, you know. I had always felt something. I'd always felt like Whitney had missed out on something.
Same objection.
All right.
We can move on.
Okay, thank you.
Where was Whitney living when you and Miss Heard first started your relationship?
She was living with her then boyfriend, Sean Krajewski.
Was this in the same? Where was Miss Heard living when you first started your relationship?
Miss Heard had informed me that she just moved to a new place on Orange Avenue.
What city is that in?
Los Angeles, sorry, yeah.
And was Whitney also living in Los Angeles?
Whitney was living in Los Angeles, yes, with Sean Krajewski and, yeah.
So how often would you see Whitney when you and Miss Heard were in a relationship?
Oh, a lot. Whitney would come over all the time with her boyfriend for dinners and such. Miss Heard always liked having people over, you know, for dinner parties and social kind of events at her place.
Have you ever done any drugs with Whitney?
Yes,
How often would you do that?
with Whitney.
Yes, with Whitney.
Maybe three times, maybe twice, 3 times.
Did there come a time when Whitney moved into the penthouses that you owned at the Eastern Columbia building?
Yes.
And when was that?
I don't remember exactly when it was, but I do remember that it was after Rocky Pennington and yes, I believe Josh Drew was there already as well. Whitney, I can't remember why she needed a place, but she needed a place, so we gave her penthouse 4 to live in.
And how long did she live there for?
Oh boy, on and off for, I suppose, a couple of years.
And how much rent did you charge her?
Nothing.
Now, you said you did drugs a couple times with Whitney. What drugs were you doing with Whitney?
Whitney and I had done a line or two of cocaine together.
When did you start getting introduced to Miss Heard's friends after you started your relationship with her?
Almost immediately. Well, in fact, immediately, yeah. Immediately. I was introduced to the whole gang, you know. Rocky, Io, Brittany Eustace, Whitney, certainly. Who else? That's all that comes to mind at the moment.
No, you mentioned Rocky. Who is that specifically?
Raquel Pennington. It was Miss Heard's good friend from youth, I suppose.
And I think you mentioned Brittany Eustace as well. Who is that?
Brittany Eustace was just one of the gals, you know. She was one of the gals, and she was quite bubbly and funny and real sweet girl, southern girl. I haven't seen her in. I think that something went sideways between Brittany Eustace and the girls because she suddenly just disappeared from the group.
And when was that?
We were probably a year and a half, or maybe 2 years into the relationship, 3 years maybe.
And I believe you mentioned someone named Io. Who is that?
Io Tillett Wright was a friend of Ms. Heard's from New York City, who was who had identified as she was born a female, if that's the right terminology these days, born a female, but she was she had chosen she at a very young age she had decided that she was a male, and she identified as a male. And Io seemed to be, again, she was very intelligent, very literate, kind of a go-get-em kind of activist type. And she was writing a book, I remember. She was writing a book, Io, or he was writing a book, rather. And I had a house on one of my, on Sweetser, one of the houses there was empty. And it was in fact a house that I'd set up to write in. And when she had no place to stay or go, whatever, I I called her over and I showed her the house, where the desk was and all the things. And so I said, write your book, write your book here. So she did.
Did Io end up living in that house or just working there?
No, Io ended up, no, she ended up living in the house for somewhere in the neighborhood of a year, I guess. Somewhere about a year.
And how much rent did you charge to Io?
Nothing.
And did there also come a time when Rocky moved into the penthouses at the Eastern Columbia building?
Rocky moved into penthouse 2.
And do you recall when that was?
Oh no, penthouse 1. Sorry, penthouse 1. That was not long after Ms. Heard and I started to begin to dress that place up as our residence. So it wasn't very long after that at all that Rocky came. I had already had my friend Isaac, who you've met, Isaac Baruch, painter. I had already given him penthouse 2 to stay in and live in and paint in, because he'd just come back from Florida, and his mom had passed away, and I think he had about $3 in his pocket. So I gave him the penthouse and asked him if he had enough paint, and so he lived there.
Why did Rocky move into the penthouses?
Objection, foundation,
I'll overrule foundation.
and hearsay. The question potentially calls for hearsay.
I'll overrule that for the moment. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Depp.
Why did, sorry, what was it again?
Why did Rocky end up moving into the penthouses?
She ended up moving into the penthouses. I don't recall. I believe it was something to do with just not having a place. And Amber had asked if I would be okay with, Rocky moving in. And I said, of course. The penthouse is empty. I wasn't in the, I wasn't going to be renting them out necessarily anyway. They were for friends to come and stay. Penthouse 4, in fact, was initially planned out for my sister Christy to have an escape from her 3,000 grandchildren and the amount of workload that she had taken on at the company.
How long did Miss Pennington end up staying in the penthouses?
Longer than I did.
And how much rent did you charge to Miss Pennington?
Nothing.
Did anyone live with Miss Pennington in the penthouses?
Yes, her fiance or boyfriend and fiance Josh Drew. And then at a certain point, I learned that there was another female living there. Who I wasn't sure who that was. I didn't know who that was. Because there were 2 bedrooms, and so she had invited a friend to move in. But I met that person very briefly a while after they had already been living there.
Are you at a good breaking point?
I think
just
this
wanna
is a
make sure.
good
Okay,
stopping point.
That's fine. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 5 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and break for the evening. Again, do not discuss the case with anybody and don't do any outside research, okay? We'll see you in the morning at 10 a.m., all right? Thank you. You're excused for the day. Thank you. All right. And again, sir, since you're in the middle of your testimony, did not discuss your testimony with anybody to include your attorneys this evening, okay? All right, you can stand down if you'd like. Okay, thank you. All right, is there any other matters for this evening? Sure, sure.